I find it very disappointing that Joe Biden would make these comments about Afghanistan and Russia going after our troops based on a New York Times story. What about when he was vice president and the DEA and all of the great agencies in the United States law enforcement working with the military came up with concrete evidence and information about how Hezbollah was working very closely with the drug cartels and moving millions and millions of dollars around the world to support their operations? And what about the briefing to Eric Holder when he was told about the magnitude of the amount of money that was moving around the world to support Hezbollah? And what did the Obama administration do?
The Obama administration accused of turning a blind eye to Hezbollah's drug trafficking activities while it was pursuing the Iran nuke deal.
They went out and made a deal with the terrorists in Iran. And now Joe Biden has the nerve to talk about President Trump. And now the politicians like Joe Biden come out of the woodwork and they want everyone to believe that President Trump failed to act. We all know that if President Trump had concrete information and the facts were verified, he would have taken aggressive and appropriate action.
I'd like to start today by briefly addressing what I consider to be a horrifying revelation in the New York Times. The U.S. intelligence community has assessed that a Russian military intelligence unit has been offering bounties to extremist groups in Afghanistan to kill U.S. troops. Shocking revelation. President Trump, the commander-in-chief of American troops serving in a dangerous theater of war, has known about this for months and done worse than nothing. He has this information, according to the Times, and yet he offered to host Putin in the United States. It's a betrayal of the most sacred duty we bear as a nation. And I'm quite frankly outraged by the report.
Last administration received specific information, specific intelligence on targets, had evidence on the targets about Hezbollah's role in the global drug trafficking. What did they do? Why didn't they support law enforcement on the evolving threat of national security of Hezbollah as they moved all into Latin America and all into the region in the Western Hemisphere to be positioned to attack the United States? Why was the military leaders putting together threat assessments for years about the growth of Hezbollah all over the Western Hemisphere? Why was General Kelly and all these other great leaders in Southern Command testifying about the threats to the country from Hezbollah? And what was Obama and former Vice President Joe Biden doing about this? Did they support the legitimate information from their leaders, or did they ignore it and the problem got worse?
A bombshell report by Politico alleging the Obama administration interfered with a federal investigation into how Iran-backed terror group Hezbollah turned profits on illegal drugs and weapons trafficking. According to the report, the previous administration didn't want anything to get in the way of a nuclear deal with Tehran.
Shocking revelation.
Federal investigators were watching and gathering evidence of Hezbollah sort of transforming itself.
Funneling money and drugs in a way that was then giving millions of dollars to some of our worst enemies. In many of these cases, you didn't get movement or resolve, even though people have been indicted.
Shocking revelation.
In our backyards all over America, they were sending used cars back into West Africa to sell. And the profits of these used cars and all this drug trafficking money was going back to support Hezbollah at the tune of $200 million a month. We didn't have leadership in the administration that would actually enforce and hold people accountable to bring the agencies together to ensure that we can protect the American public.
Shocking revelation.
We briefed Eric Holder. He was very alarmed by the findings of this particular investigation and the magnitude of money and drugs that were moving around the world. So Eric Holder was serious about having follow-up meetings with national security team members. So it was very strange for me sitting there listening to the Attorney General of the United States directing his people to have a meeting to get more information from the DEA and our interagency partners about this global trade-based money laundering scheme, and they weren't interested. It never happened.
Shocking revelation.
From my perspective, if you have this magnitude of money and drugs moving through our country and the banks in our country, that should have been something that our government enforced full accountability on all the agencies to work together and shut it down.
But it didn't happen.
It didn't happen.
And I'm quite frankly outraged by the report.
Joe Biden, you had a chance to keep America safe during the last administration. You failed. You didn't listen to law enforcement. It was all about the politics, so it's time to retire. America needs law and order to be the #1 priority.